Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present on the randomized control trial, which is part of the whole project to evaluate the impact of warning labels in South Africa. So we know that front of pack labels ultimately try to guide consumer choice, but it can also serve a purpose to encourage healthier food reformulation, and it can engage consumers in better understanding and improving their knowledge on what's in their food. There are different types of labels, and I'm not going to go through the whole lot of them, but they range from nutrient specific to summative or interpretive and non-interpretive labels. And as the food supply changes in a country, as well as the nutrition situation in a country, one needs to look then at which label will be most appropriate for that particular country setting. In South Africa, we then planned, after we've been asked to look at possible labels, and we were specifically asked to see whether a warning label, how it will perform and whether that would be appropriate. So our objectives were to evaluate which front of pack warning label would be best at conveying information on nutrients of concern that's found in excessive amounts in packaged food products, and which warning label would convey information on the unhealthiness of certain packaged food products, and then subsequently discourage consumers from purchasing those unhealthy food products and consuming them. So we designed a particular project, randomized controlled trial in a nationally representative sample with a within and a between subject design. And the hypothesis was that the newly developed warning label, and Makoma told you how we came about that warning label, that warning, the newly developed warning label will perform better than the GDA and the multiple traffic light. Now, you may ask on these two, and in retrospect, that looked at front of pack warning labels recommended that the country should go ahead with and use another nutrient profiling model, specifically the SUNS, and that we should follow the multiple traffic light and use that as a warning on our food products. So that was the reason for these three to be used. Initially, we also wanted to use two different warning labels, but after the qualitative work, we realized that the warning label actually, it's just the elements within the warning label that differed, and not really, we didn't really have two completely different warnings. And that's why we concluded with only one. So in order to do the randomized control trial, we then developed imaginary food products, and you'll see we had single products as well as product pairs, and the products were chosen so that they would have different package designs and shapes, because a warning label may appear different on them. And then also that the products were of different perceptions of healthiness. because people, if they have a particular perception, may be interpreting the warning or the nutrition information on the label differently. So just to give you an illustration of what it looked like on the packages. So the warning label was placed in the top right-hand corner, and that was informed, that position was informed by the qualitative work, which Makoma reported on. And the images of the products were not 3D, they were printed in 2D on a laminated white sheet, life-size kind of, but they were of such a nature that the participant could handle the page and could also bring it closer to their eyes if they wanted to inspect the label in more detail. The randomly selected sample represented all of the different provinces in the country, except they were low numbers in some of the provinces, but yeah, all of the provinces were represented, and we used geographic maps based on the census 2011 with a random starting point. And from there, we followed interval sampling with immediate replacement if a household wasn't available, present, or that particular plot was not inhabited. In the end, we ended up with 1,951 participants in our sample, which is around 78% response rate. And the process was that each participant in the RCT were exposed to the full set of products, 3 single products as well as the 3 paired products. And they were asked a set of questions on those products. Immediately afterwards, they were then exposed to the same set of products, asked exactly the same questions, but this time the products contained a label, and each participant only saw one of the label conditions. So either the warning label or the GDA or the multiple traffic light. And we did the randomization through the field workers only having one set of label conditions with them, and that was the set that they applied to all their participants. So it was basically every third one had a different exposure, and the starting order of the exposure in each of the EAs every day was decided randomly. So just to report on our first question, and that was whether their perception, whether the product is healthy or unhealthy. And in the colorful circles there, you see the proportion of participants who regarded a product as healthy. And more than 80% said that the crisps were unhealthy. Less than 20% said that the juice were unhealthy. The beverages, more than 80% said were unhealthy. And then with the sweet biscuits, the breakfast cereals, you see that they were just around 50%. So that was kind of the fence sitters. And again, yogurt were perceived as being a healthy product. As I said, we did within a particular label condition, the results were compared between the before and the after, and then we also compared between the different label conditions, the proportion within each of the groups with the rating according to the questions that we asked. Just one mention here that there were some differences in terms of geolocation and specifically metro or non-metro, as well as having post-matric qualification or not between the three groups, and therefore we controlled for that in our analysis. I'm just going to quickly skip to the results and show you the average partial effect of the three labels, assisting consumers in correctly identifying products high in salt and high in saturated fat is what you see on this slide. The blue bar represents the warning label, the brick-colored bar, the GDA, and the green bar, the multiple traffic light. And you will see that the only warning label in these products and for these particular nutrients were consistently a greater proportion of consumers were able, or participants were able, to identify a product as high in salt or high in saturated fat after being exposed to the product with the label on it was the warning label. For GDA and multiple traffic light, in some products, there was an increase in correctly identifying the products, but in others, actually some participants got it wrong or changed their mind in the wrong direction. In terms of salt, of sugar, for the three label conditions, you see exactly the same picture with the warning label, the only one consistently assisting participants in correctly identifying the product as high in sugar. And the choice with the paired products, just for clarification, they had to choose which one is the highest in sugar or salt or saturated fat, whereas with the three single products, it was, is this product high in, or does it contain excessive amounts of sugar? And maybe I didn't show that in a particular slide, but how we identified the nutrient content or the profile of the products we used is, after we've designed the imaginary product, we've tried to find a product on the market that's very similar to that product. So for example, strawberry yogurt, but we choose one particular label that's quite often being purchased. We then looked at the nutrient composition of that particular product, and using the nutrient profiling model for the warning labels, as well as the cut points for GDA and multiple traffic light, we then allocated whether the product should carry a warning label, should carry a label or not, and what the color coding, for example, in multiple traffic light would be. So it was really assigned based on real life values. In terms of whether they perceived a product to be unhealthy, and I have to emphasize, because it is quite critical what language you use in your questions, again, you'll see that the warning label consistently guided participants to identify products as unhealthy. The change, the difference in, or the size of the effect is smaller for products which they regarded as unhealthy before the time, compared to products, for example, juice, which they actually regarded as healthy. So that's why you see different sizes in the bar of change. But with regards to GDA and multiple traffic light, you see a mixed effect and no consistent pattern. So in terms of our recommendations, we would advise that should government consider regulations and for a warning label, we would recommend a black triangle on a holding strip with a warning sign on the left-hand side, because that performed best in our randomized controlled trial. The larger size, there were some additional questions to participants, and they consistently said, no, the larger size would be more effective. The top right corner being the position that's most visible to participants. Based on our nutrient profiling model, we would recommend sugar, salt, and saturated fat. We did make a recommendation on the presence of artificial or non-sugar sweeteners, but we didn't test it in this particular trial, so that's why I'm not making that recommendation here. Our recommendation would be that it should be mandatory to try and avoid any confusion and also some undermining of labels that might happen. We think that the warning labels would be quite complementary to our existing health promotion levy, and recommend that it should be combined with other policies to restrict, for example, restriction of marketing to children, but inclusion also in an integrated approach with health promotion and obesity prevention strategies. And it could even be used for taxation of unhealthy foods, or, for example, for provisioning in school food environments like they have done in Chile. Lastly, I just need to acknowledge the funding and the members of the expert panel that advised us. And the funding came from Bloomberg as well as IDRC and Center of Excellence in Food Security for student scholarships. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.